What's up, everyone? This is Matt with Medical Device Matt. I'm with Spencer Ansett, an awesome recruiter covering the United States, lives up in the Pacific Northwest, which means he's a huge Gonzaga fan, which
That's right.
conflicts with me a little bit being a Bruin fan. And we were talking a lot about, the epic games that UCLA Bruins and Gonzaga has had over the years. And most
Oh,
recently, Spencer's been probably a little bit happier with Gonzaga's outcomes.
yeah, yeah. We've turned the table a little bit. You guys killed us with that first one back in '03 that had Morrison on the floor, but we've turned the table a little bit.
I
I'm
think I
thankful
think we
for.
traded our soul a little
Yeah.
bit for that win, but hopefully we
That's
right.
fair.
I really believe in Coach Cronin has an awesome team this year, so we'll be all right. But
Yeah.
what I'm really excited about is you've been in the recruiting space specifically for medical device for let you share your story in your company, but for
Yeah.
many years. So I'm curious
Yeah.
to pick your brain on your expertise in that field and how candidates trying to break in or people out of undergraduate could break in. So maybe can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, yeah. Thank you for that intro and also for slipping the Zags in there. It's great stuff. I've been doing this for almost 9 years now. Had no idea what I was getting into at the beginning, just as far as like being a headhunter, recruiting, medical sales. I mean, I don't know if this is the same for you, but when I learned that, potentially two or three people scrubbed up in an OR are sales reps, that was like a shock to me. Had no idea, but yeah, so I've been doing this a while for a company called Career Search International. And we're a third party agency and source in medical sales and fill anything from VPs, working on a VP of sales position right now, all the way down to clinical specialists and associates and anything in between. So it's been a great, I love the job. I love helping people find jobs. I love helping managers find talent and being the liaison for that whole process.
That's really cool. And just to remind me,
Yeah.
9 years of medical device recruiting?
Yeah. I mean, our big umbrella is sales, but we've really kind of gone very specific. And myself, probably 98% of the jobs I fill are medical device. We'll do some one-offs here and there. And early on, we would do some B2B companies just to kind of help people get into sales. But yeah, medical device, very much so.
I think that's really awesome. So this podcast was geared towards undergraduates trying to break into medical device, but also seasoned reps looking for more experience or exposure to different devices, different companies, different fields. And in
Yeah.
your role, it sounds like you're helping, entry level all the way to seasoned reps to more leadership, right? Almost
Yeah.
up to the C-suite.
Yeah, we do both. A lot less VPs, a lot less RSMs, because those positions are obviously a lot more networked. People know who they know already. Those positions come less often, but we do both. And then, do a lot of associate positions, clinicals, people wanting to break in and fill in those types of jobs.
Well, I'm really excited. I'm going to kick this off. For
Yeah.
entry level people trying to break into medical device, what's
Yeah.
your recommendation? What are you looking for? What are managers looking for?
Good question. I think for an entry level person, first and foremost, the medical device industry itself is not entry level, right? Like it's a destination industry for a lot of people. So that's one thing that I try to tell people. They'll message and say, I really want to do this. And, as their first line of work experience. And so the first thing I tell people is like, all right, kind of gear up, like this is not just going to get another job, right? This is kind of the big leagues of sales, this and software. So, first recommendation is understand what you're trying to do. Right. And I'm sure you kind of experienced that, like you got right into it, but it's an arduous process to get in. Gear up for what you're trying to do. And then the second thing I say is really market education. A lot of people try to project their desires onto the market as opposed to figuring out what's the market looking for right now in terms of experience, education, who gets hired where. So those are kind of initial steps, and we can kind of talk through more details, but yeah, realize what you're getting into and then educate yourself on the market, what companies hire, what type of experience. Those two things will help you very much so as you're kind of getting into it.
So I have a lot of questions. I
Yeah.
didn't really know what recruiters were. I see a bunch posted on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. We'll have that conversation for later. But my story is that I graduated from UCLA with a neuroscience degree, so I had a biology background. I was able to work in the hospital and have a few jobs. But after college, I got really lucky and applied online to Medtronic and a lot of other companies. Had a lot of rejections, a lot of people not responding. But
Yeah.
my process, it was tough, but I eventually landed an amazing job with Medtronic in the clinical specialist role. So when you
Yeah.
tell people to prepare, can you kind of go into that with, I mean, is there, what is a time frame to break in? How many calls, how many jobs are they applying
Yeah.
to, interviews? What is it like so people understand? Because for example, I just talked to someone, an awesome guy, but he's been trying to break in for 6 months with not much luck.
Yeah. That's a really good question. And yeah, I'd love to at the end here, I'll just kind of ask you, I'd love to hear about your specific process. I mean, just ultra impressive getting into Medtronic right off the shoot. I mean, that's not easy. So, but like you illustrated, you went through a lot of rejections, a lot of no response. And so, yeah, I think it's crazy. 6 months feels like a long time, but in terms of getting into medical device, I've seen people try for a year or two, and they just keep going and keep going. And a lot of times, I think a year or two is really a good time frame to really establish a strong network. 6 months isn't that long, and it feels long, and that's the hard part because you're like, man, I'm getting all these rejections, and then it affects your, mental and all that stuff. But so I would say the market turns over every 3 to 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Those are kind of the hiring cycles. So expect, yeah, some people get a quick hit, and that's great, but some people it takes 2 or 3 of those market turnovers. So that could be, 9 months to a year and a half. And then I think in terms of companies to apply for, I just tell people to apply. I think a good number of, to manage real live opportunities. I don't think you want to be involved in too many more than like 5 active interview processes. But until you get, 5 that are active, apply, network. It does take a lot of activity. I talk to a lot of candidates that feel like job searching is a full-time job in and of itself. And that's
Yeah.
no joke. So if you're a seasoned rep looking, gear up too, because you still got to take care of your business. But then also these
Yeah.
companies, yeah, they want to see you put in effort, and the interview process can be a lot like a sales process. And
Yeah.
so if you're not going to approach it with the same level of attention to detail that you would approach a sale in your job, that can be the difference sometimes of them maybe going with someone else.
Yeah. What's
So
interesting is you said establishing your network. And I've been with Medtronic 9 years, and it's really
yeah,
easy for me to grow my network. I see people in the hospital. I know a lot of people. A lot of my colleagues went to different companies into sales roles or leadership roles. So my network has grown. But you mentioned it's kind of like a job. So if I was trying to break in, I mean, it sounds like you advocate networking, which is, if I go back to my story, I remember a Medtronic engineer came to UCLA's campus. My buddy was running an engineering club, and I wanted to go support him. And I remember, a year later when I applied, I was like, I met this engineer. I'm going to call him and say he's my referral. And
yeah,
that's really how I got in. But when you're looking at, establishing your network, I mean, I have people call me that said, hey, Matt, I have an Excel sheet. I don't want to make you feel like a number, but you're my like 100th, 20th, third person that I'm calling. You work at Medtronic, you're in TAVR structural heart, and I like to follow up with each of these people that I connect with on LinkedIn. So what
yeah.
does, for you, establishing the network mean during this process?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my mantra is network for the jobs you want and apply to the jobs you're qualified for. So for a lot of recent grads, the jobs they're qualified for is B2B sales, and B2B companies like Cintas, Paychex, ADP, all those ones, copiers. Those are the jobs that you can start to kind of put your, line in the water per se, and have kind of live opportunities going for these B2B sales jobs. So you pursue that alongside what you're talking about is networking. And I tell people to, before they start networking, educate themselves on the market. So LinkedIn is an amazing tool. It's an amazing networking tool, but I think what it's more powerful for right now is it's a public career database that people are updating themselves. So, medical device Matt is keeping people posted on, hey, I just moved here. I just did this, right? So I can see your whole career, and I don't have to know you at all.
Yeah.
And if you can look at a bunch of people's careers and find the people who have the job that you want, and pay attention to how did they get there? They went to here. They got a degree in neuroscience. I have
Yeah.
a degree in neuroscience. Okay, maybe I should network with Matt, right? So I
Yeah.
tell people, educate yourselves on the market and the people who are where you want to be. And it's super easy because it's all on there on LinkedIn. It's just more targeted networking. And you want to be in a position where you're connecting with people who have similar traits to you.
Yeah.
So this company hires, college athletes. This company hires PTs. This
Yeah.
company hires. Find stories that are similar to yours and network with those companies. Don't waste your time trying to be the first, right? Like that's a hard thing to do,
Yeah.
trying to be, oh, I'm going to be the first PT this company's ever hired. I love an underdog story, but a lot of times it's managers hire stories that have been told to them before. So finding those and networking with those people is what I generally recommend.
Yeah, I really like that. Especially, once you're established, I think that's great. For example, if I want to go and do VP of sales or business development or upstream marketing, I could go
Mm-hmm.
find those people and say, hey, actually, they had sales experience 10 years ago. Then they went internal. Then they went to, associate upstream and slowly moved up that pathway, which is awesome. And I think,
Yeah.
one issue is a lot of people say, oh, I want to break into medical devices. My uncle did. It made a lot of money in ortho, or, my dad used to sell
Yeah.
cents. My dad is not from medical devices, but, someone has this family story of making a lot of money. And I think there's more to medical
Yes.
device, and you have to find your why. But I don't think there's a good job of exposure to the industry. So I did one video about a day in the life of a clinical specialist because I think it's an amazing role with Medtronic, Abbott,
Yeah.
Boston, and the pacing division.
I
But it's
watched
hard
that.
to get
That was a great
exposure.
video.
Yeah, thanks. But
Yeah.
it's hard to get
I love that.
exposure. So, I know, top of my head, ortho, neuro, if you have candidates reaching out to you, you're kind of like, I would say, the Harry Potter sorting hat. How do you say, hey, maybe ortho is good for you, or maybe cardiac, is better? Do you have those conversations with candidates, or you
Yeah.
just, they come to you first?
Yeah, no, I'm having that conversation all the time. I think my job as a recruiter is to find a good match. And so, how do you find a good match? Well, I got to get to know the candidate. What do they like? What do they not like? So, my first question with anybody, whether they're in or in the industry already or not, is what's going on in your world? Like, that's how I start all my calls. Like, just tell me what's going on. So, yeah, always asking them, do you think OR or not OR? There's a lot of non OR medical device jobs out there that
Yeah.
are great. So OR, non OR, depending on what they think there. And if they don't know, I always tell them, well, part of, do you faint? Like, how are you? That's a component, right? Like, can you handle blood, the smells, all that type of stuff. So having conversations like that. But I think the bigger conversation is just like you're saying, what's your why beyond, hey, I heard this is a lucrative space,
Yeah.
because it is lucrative. But the two other reasons people like medical devices, it's still person facing, right?
Yeah.
Software sales is Zoom now. I mean so some people are like, yeah, no, I want to get out and talk to people. Okay,
Yeah.
you should try medical sales as opposed to software. And then the second thing is just the impact of lives. Hey, do you want to sell technology that really helps people in that realm? And man, if they hit those three, hey, it's lucrative. Yeah, I want competitive people who want to make money. But if they can speak to helping people and being in front of people on a daily basis, then generally I'd say, like, yeah, I think this would be a good fit for you.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
So yeah,
So once you get to know people, what are you
yeah,
seeing from managers or you for top traits in a candidate? And for example, I've been in medical device. I see, athletes. I see people with previous B2B sales, pharmacology, or health. And, you talk to some recruiters, internal recruiters or managers, and they're like, we want someone that's competitive and that will do anything to win, or a team player,
yeah,
or, a rock star.
yeah,
Um, really, you need someone that's, for me, when I look, is someone. So I work with patients. I work with the doctor. I'm scrubbed in. I work with, very technical. So I need to know my product well. I need to know cardiology well. And I think in medical device, there's spectrums, right? So patient facing,
yeah,
not facing, working in the OR, not calling on hospitals from more of a tower versus being in person. So there's all these spectrums. But what are
yeah.
you seeing that are good qualities? And for example, let's say, you're talking to an undergraduate that doesn't have B2B or work experience, but
Mm-hmm.
they can share these stories where, like, hey, the story you're telling or the experience shows that you have this quality. And I think that is something that these managers are looking for. So
Yeah,
what are some top qualities?
yeah. That's a really good question. And part of it, you sort of mentioned it does vary position to position, right? Like, so that's also part of my job, is I got to understand the job from the manager. But generally for a graduate, no B2B experience, the more underrated or less talked about ones that aren't so vague, like, rock star and competitive. It's like, well, okay, thank you, but what are you actually saying? So the first one is curiosity is a big one. And I think the combination of curiosity with critical thinking. So can you take information from somebody, download it, and ask a really good follow-up question? And can you do that over and over and over again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're interacting with a physician, they want to know that you can process things pretty quickly, right? The cath lab's not, chill place, I guess, like, things need to happen. So are you someone that can download information, make decisions quickly, and ask good follow-up questions? The worst interview question you can ask is, what's the day to day? It's like, oh, come on, think a little bit about what you guys are interacting on, right? So curiosity combined with good follow-up questions,
Yeah.
it shows you're listening. It shows you have an understanding of the role. That's huge. I think the other one is good follow-up. People,
Yeah.
entry-level candidates don't understand, from what I can see, and sorry if that sounds soapboxy, entry-level candidates don't understand, but from what I can see, they don't understand, hey, if a manager reached out to you, you got to reply with
Yeah.
something that says, I got this. You got to keep them in the know. Manager sends you to the second interview to talk to somebody else, circle back with the hiring manager after that second interview. And so I think those two things are really separators, and just demonstrate a person that understands communication and understands sort of some of the intangibles that are required to be successful in this space. Were you a college athlete or not? That's pretty
Yeah.
binary, right? Do you have B2B sales or not? Pretty binary. But something like communication, curiosity, and
Yeah.
critical thinking, those things are really important.
Quickly,
Yeah.
what is too much follow-up? So for example, I apply to a
Yeah.
job, I have, let's say, a interview with the HR internal, so a phone interview, and I'm waiting to see if I get an interview with a manager, or I have an in-person interview with a manager. How often should I follow up? My recommendation, first of all, is to write a thank you letter immediately within 24 hours to the hiring manager, your internal
Yeah.
contact, and any of the field reps you talk to. But let's say you had a great interview with a manager, you thought you hit it off, maybe you didn't. But how often should you be following up with that manager before their next announcement?
Yeah. So first and foremost, follow directions, right? So some managers are pretty clear. Hey, I'll get back to you on Friday. Um, and let's say it's Tuesday, you know, exactly what you said, within the first 24 hours, and ideally within the first 2 or 3 hours, follow up, let them know you're interested, communicate interest level. But, if they clearly told you, I'll follow up with you on Friday, we don't need to be sending something on Thursday, right? If they didn't say anything,
Yeah.
then my cadence is usually 2 to 3 business days if you haven't heard anything. But yeah, the keys are 24 hours, first follow up. Make it more than just thanks for your time. Reiterate your interest level, a couple things you liked about the conversation. And then, yeah, follow directions. But if there's no directions, 2 to 3 business days. And if they're not responding, odds are they're probably moving with someone else. In our world, no communication is usually bad news, so,
Yeah.
so I think that's something to take into consideration as well.
And maybe you could elaborate, but for any of the listeners, if you don't hear back after following up once or twice, I think it's good to stay in contact. And let's say they hire someone else, you still have a good relationship with that person. You don't know what's going to happen in the future, and maybe they have a future job posting. But you're right. When there's no communication, sometimes these hiring managers, I feel like, are going with a safer bet, someone that had experience, someone from the field, and they might love you. So I don't want you to take it personally that's, something against you, but hiring managers are
Right.
busy. So if they don't respond, I think it's two things. I think some people just don't want to go through the motion of letting you know you're rejected, or they have a top candidate and you might be on the bench and they're trying to decide what the top
Yep.
candidate's doing
Yep.
or she's doing. They might be negotiating salary or making something happen. Um,
Yep.
so I like what you said is, usually if there's no response, you need to keep your chin up and find the next
Yeah.
opportunity and keep making value happen.
Yeah. And you want to work with people who think you're going to provide value. And so if they're not interacting with you, they're just, hey, you're not priority right now. Find a place where you are the priority.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the hardest parts of medical device interviewing is, you talked about your friend who's going at it for, 6 months. That can wear on you. And then it shows in interviews. And all of a sudden you're the guy who's been trying for 6 months and failing. And
Yeah.
that leads to negative momentum. So continuing to press on, zoom
Press
out.
on, go to where you're valued. But this industry is so small, right? Where,
Yes.
if you have, like I said, if you have a good interview, not a bad interview, if you have a good interview and end on good terms, like you're suggesting with your follow up,
Yeah.
those people might reach out in 6 or 12 months, or they'll see what you're doing or check in and say, hey,
Yeah.
Spence, I saw that you're at this company. It's been a year. Are you liking it? Something opened up over
Yeah.
here, and I remember that you were amazing in our interview, but the timing wasn't right.
Yep. Totally agree with that. Yeah. You always want to leave a good taste in someone's mouth because you don't know. Like I said, 3 to 6 months is kind of when things turn over.
Yeah.
They might be useful or you might be useful to them in some time in the future. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So talking about undergraduates, your two pieces of trades advice were awesome. I always just simplify as, if you're humble, hungry, which
Yeah.
means, willing to learn and hustling, you're going to do well, right? And I think the
Yeah.
biggest thing in medical device is you don't need to know everything, but if you're willing to learn about your own product, read just general cardiology research for what I do or the competitors, or if you don't know, you just say, hey, I don't know. I'm going to find out right now. I'm going to make a call or I'm going to connect you to someone. And then, like you said, following up is going to really set you apart. But it sounds like you think undergraduates or people with a 0 to 2 years of work experience can break into medical devices.
Yeah, they can. I've seen it happen. It depends on the company and what they're open to. So, there's some companies that would rather not hire that, but there's plenty of companies that would. We have a client who, it's an associate sales rep position. It pays 65,000
Yeah.
or 60,000, but they're open to fresh grads. So I think it's more about doing the research and expanding and talking to people and seeing what's viable. And
So,
then, sorry, go ahead.
well, I was just really interested. I'm gonna throw an alley oop to you, and
Yeah.
hopefully you throw it
Yeah.
down. But we talked about establishing a network,
Yep.
researching the market, and would you recommend working with a recruiter? Because I didn't know anything about recruiters until I got
Yeah.
on LinkedIn. But to me, it seems like the trend in college was these matchmaking dating apps, which I never got on. But I saw all my
Yeah.
friends using dating apps, and it seemed like it just connected everyone to the right people, right?
Yeah.
So if I was an undergraduate, would you recommend coming from a recruiter's mouth working with a recruiter?
Yeah. I would, but I'll throw a caveat on there. You know, Working with a recruiter, we don't get paid by candidates, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I have to work for and with the people that pay us, which is
Yeah.
the clients. So um, certainly there's career coaches out there.
Mm-hmm.
You can say what you want about career coaches. Some people think they're not worth it. Some people do. I don't necessarily have an opinion, but on that either way. I think it depends on the coach. But I would definitely say add recruiters to your Rolodex of people you want to network with. A lot of people will approach me and say, "Hey, can you help me find a job?" I don't know. Depends on the market, depends on
Yeah.
where you live, depends on that. But I would say don't discount headhunters, recruiters, third party agency recruiters. Reach out to them as well. See if you can get one on the phone. They have a broader perspective of the market that can be
Mm-hmm.
really helpful. So yeah, I would definitely say reach out to
Yeah.
recruiters for sure.
So so what I'm hearing is, there's career coaches, you have friends that could help you. There's also prep schools that specialize in cardiac, ortho, or medical device in general that will give you a great training and network. But with
Yeah,
recruiters, it sounds like what your first recommendation was, which is establish your network. So if I saw your profile on LinkedIn, and we'll make sure to share your profile, if I
yeah,
said, Spence, this is Matt Abrams down in SoCal. I'm open to remote work. I'm open to moving anywhere. My background
yeah,
is neuroscience. I'm looking to break into medical devices. Here's my resume. Just consider me for the future. That sounds like
yeah.
the
Yeah,
takeaway.
that would be a good move. And I mean, we could talk all about your LinkedIn profile, but the little stuff I'll say is make it clear on your LinkedIn profile what your objective is. And there's a couple
So
ways to do that.
let's talk about that. I want to hear this.
Yeah, yeah. There's a couple ways to do that. So if I'll see like maybe aspiring medical sales rep or you know um, 2024 grad trying to get into medical sales, put that on your title or somewhere on your profile. I want to know what your objective is,
Mm-hmm.
because what that does is there's so many people that just visit profiles, right? That we're just looking around. And so if I get a connection request from somebody, I mean, I'd be curious what you do, but if I get a connection request from somebody, I don't just click accept. I click on their profile first, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, who is this person? So if you have a profile that indicates here's my goals and objectives, that'll help a lot. There's a couple other things, but I would say when I tell people to network, people spend a lot of time crafting an initial message. I think that's a waste of time. I think you want volume. Everyone knows what you're doing on LinkedIn. You're trying to connect. That's what the button says. So just click the connect button, and then you want to follow up with the people that accept your connection requests, because I know that person's active and I know that person has looked at my profile. And
Yeah.
so once you get a connection acceptance, then that's Spence. Hey, saw you on, MDM, would love to talk about getting into medical device. That's where you kind of do the message, because it's hard to craft all those messages and you put a lot of pressure on yourself. Like, I got to say the exact right thing to get this person to accept.
Yeah.
No, it's not about the message, it's about your profile. it's not about what you say initially. So hopefully that's a little nuance that I think it might be helpful as you're doing your networking stuff.
I think that's a really good point. It goes without saying. Have a clean photo, a professional photo for LinkedIn, which is a professional networking
Yep.
site.
Yep.
Having your objective or your why, be it aspiring medical graduate or graduating in 2024, or I want to be ortho sales, or I think what's
Yeah.
important for you is probably if someone says I only want to work in SoCal, that limits their job opportunities, right? But if maybe on their
Yeah.
profile if it said open to anywhere or whatnot, that would be really
Yeah.
helpful. And then you don't need to talk about this, but working with undergraduates have resume and on-site advisors to help you with your resume, but also your LinkedIn, where you might not have work experience, but they could come up with a creative way to make your LinkedIn profile look
Right.
professional in the sense of a photo, but also with your experience and sharing that. So that's awesome. That's
Right.
a really good share.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say use LinkedIn. I mean, like I said, it's a public database. So even if you don't have anyone in your corner, you can learn a lot by just looking up people's LinkedIn profiles.
Yeah.
I want that job that this person has. What does their profile look like? And then make it look like that.
And
You can learn a lot.
in regard to applying to jobs, do you recommend people use LinkedIn and apply through LinkedIn, or use LinkedIn to find the jobs or the network and then go to the original career site for that company to apply?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I like the easy apply on LinkedIn. I'm kind of a low barrier advocate when it comes to like, how difficult is it to apply to your job? So
Yeah.
I think applying on LinkedIn is great. I don't know if it matters a whole ton. The one thing I will say about that is, when you apply for a job and you find the person who's responsible, I would just hit the connect button. You don't need to do an initial message of like, hey, I applied to your job or anything like that. Cause we think that's networking, but you're actually selling at that point. Networking is when there's nothing on the line,
Yeah, true.
right? It's just, hey, I'm just trying to get to know you. So I always tell people don't be too aggressive to the decision maker right away. It doesn't cast the right tone, I don't think. Connect with them and then see if you're actually qualified and they want to chat with you and go from there.
Yeah.
So,
And my biggest, I've had very little success reaching out to managers, but what
yeah,
I've had success doing was, I see you post a job and you're hiring for it, not as a recruiter, but let's say you're the medical device leader hiring a job. I find
yeah,
out who's lateral of that person and try to reach out to those people in a
yeah,
in a polite and courteous way. Those people are busy and there's probably a bunch of people that reach out to them. But if let's say you're the hiring manager, I see person A is, the same role. I reach out and say, hey, I saw you had a lot of success at Medtronic. Would love to hear your thoughts and your experience. And usually
yeah,
people will answer like, I would love to, talk about myself and my experience. And then all of a sudden what happens
yeah,
is if you close with kind of an ask, right? You say, hey, I saw that role, you know, you think I could apply or qualify, that person, if they refer you, is going to receive, $1,000 or $2,000. And then even
yeah,
more importantly, they're going to call their manager who, we talk to our managers every single day. Hey man, I just talked to Spence. This guy is really rad out of Pacific Northwest. Unfortunately, he likes the Gonzaga, but he's a good
we can look
golfer.
past it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
he's a
right.
good golfer, which makes up for it. So we'll get him. You need to talk to this candidate, and I think
Yeah,
that's how I had the most success is going through, that network, which goes back to your number one point of establishing a
yeah.
network where people will advocate for you and refer you in.
Yeah, and to your point, when there's nothing riding on the interaction, people are so generous.
Yeah,
But when you're going straight to the decision maker, they get a lot tighter with, well, if I engage now, then I got to go through the process if they're not qualified, yada yada.
yeah,
But you reach out to the counterpart or somebody else who's just, yeah, I'll talk for 10 minutes. You're going to get a lot more traction. So just to reiterate, that's awesome. I don't know if you got that advice or if you just figured out that that was effective, but
that's
yeah,
what
that's
I do.
great.
But what I also
Yeah.
appreciate if people message me and say, "Hey Matt, I applied to this job for Medtronic with this requisition ID."
Yeah.
And I say, great, here's my employee number. Put me down as a referral, and I wish
Yeah.
you the best. Because
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't care. Someone on LinkedIn maybe has the same, went to Pepperdine with me or undergrad, or I know,
Yeah.
it's quick and dirty. They don't need to waste their time talking to me. I know they have had a successful career,
Right.
which is a
Right.
little bit different than someone trying to break in, and they need to kind of get exposure to all
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
This has been
Yeah.
awesome. This is
Oh,
surprisingly, you and I planned on talking for 10 minutes about breaking in, but we had such a rich discussion about
yeah.
graduates could break in, people with 0 to 2 years, or people with medical device experience looking for their next move. Before
Yeah.
we close out, I would love just to hear, we know who you are, but maybe just close us out
Yeah.
with where we could find you. And if there's anything, the medical device Matt community could do for you.
Yeah. MDM. Oh man, I'm happy to be here. First of all, I'll say that. So yeah, thanks for having me on. And then yeah, thanks for giving me a little platform here. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn, Spencer Ansett, Career Search International. Yeah, connect, reach out. I always tell candidates, hey, if I'm available, I try to be as generous as possible with my time. So if I'm available, let's connect. If I'm not, I got to take care of my clients, like I said, but I always find gaps for candidates and just, hey, like, yeah, happy to share advice and talk about your current situation. So connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the best way. And then I would love to get on the phone with you and kind of talk about how you can get into the space. And then you network with people like Matt, guys. I mean, this guy, I think it's really unique what you're doing, and I think you're making some great content, and it's really helpful just to talk to someone who's actually doing it, right? Because you can get into hypothetical conversations, but I loved your day in the life because it was so non-hypothetical. It was,
Yeah.
hey, this is exactly what goes on, and it even shocked me that you're seeing 25 patients a day for in
Yeah.
the span of 3 hours. Like I was like, whoa, that is, I didn't know that, so I learned something from the video. It was awesome.
Yeah. That would be a busier clinic, but you know what? I think we have the onus to share this amazing industry. There's so many amazing jobs, and you could use with a biology degree. So many amazing jobs in healthcare. Because
Yeah,
my big thing is undergrad biology. Oh, I'm going pre med. Everyone's pre med, pre med, pre med, which is awesome,
yeah,
fulfilling
yeah,
career. But there's a
yeah,
lot of really amazing careers. You're a recruiter in med tech. You absolutely love it. I love what I do. A lot of people I talk to love it for many different reasons, and
yeah,
that's really why we started Medical Device Met. So we're going to close this out. Spence, you're
yeah.
always welcome down to Southern California. We got a place for you to stay and some awesome golf
Oh,
courses.
I
We
love it.
appreciate all your advice today. Like it's funny because, like I said, you and I talked before this. Oh, 10 minutes will be easy conversation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We went a little longer,
We
and
did.
what
We
we'll
did.
do in the future is we're going to do another episode for a more established candidate, talking about
Yeah,
what do all those LinkedIn messages mean from HR recruiters and kind of the behind the scenes perspective that right.
yeah,
I'm really excited because I get messages all the time, and I want to
yeah.
know the company's inner workings, and I want to know your inner workings. So stay tuned. That's going to be an awesome episode. Spence, thank you so much. We'll catch you guys all next time.
Thanks, Matt. Really appreciate it.
Of
See ya.
course.